questions before we start the scavenger hunt about what's going on, or midterm grades, figuring any of that out? We will have an exam on Malcolm X, and I'll probably make some bonus questions too about this little thing we're going to do this morning, because I think it's fun. Now, I have a student in English senior seminar, whenever I say, don't you think that's fun, or isn't that funny? He's like, I can see how that would be very fun for professors. But, at least I'm not trying to be boring or regular, as my children would say. So, any questions, though, before we start the game? So I've written some names on the board, and I'll put some in the chat as well for those of you who are virtual. And you can work on those. But wait for a second till I give you a little bit more instruction. And I'm not sure we'll find all of the rest of those. So if Shadaria, you would like to take Santiwa, and Gina, if you can take Fedon's Rebellion. What I'm going to ask each of the people who are here and virtual to do is to do, by scavenger hunt, I just mean Google these terms, and then we're going to put together a digital story about them. And we'll do that collaboratively. I'll send everybody the link. If you want, like I said, if you want my connection, of course, isn't working. So Louise Little, as you know, is Malcolm X's mother. And I was just reading a book called The Three Mothers, which is about the mothers of Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and James Baldwin. And it's a New York Times bestseller, and it's a really fantastic book. And some of the material about Louise Little I found stunning, considering that in this class we have been talking a little bit about revolutions in Haiti, the US Revolution, and about a kind of international idea of African American studies. So when we think about Malcolm X and his connections to the Jamaican leader Marcus Garvey, we take into account that his mother and father were both Garveyites, meaning they both helped to organize and run chapters of the United Negro Improvement Association. And actually, his mother was a close confidant of Marcus Garvey and wrote for the UNIA newspaper frequently. So Louise Little, Malcolm's mother, was really an intellectual powerhouse. She is the one who would make her children look up words in the dictionary every day. She is the one who, when their children came home from school every day and had been miseducated, would teach them everything over again, especially history. She was born in Grenada, which is in the West Indies, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Grenada that she was very familiar with, and also about how that plays into some of Malcolm X's revolutionary ideas. So Louise Little was born at the end of the 19th century in Grenada. There are rumors, but not any verifiable information that her mother was raped by a white man, because Louise was very fair complexioned and had long straight hair. However, there is a history in Grenada of the first people, the Arawak and the Carib people, who also might have looked a little bit like Louise Little. She could have passed for white, but she chose not to. And like I said, she was a very important intellectual influence and a very activist, engaged, powerful leader in her own right. And if you remember from the beginning of the Malcolm X film, when the Ku Klux Klan attacks the home and she stands outside with the gun, she doesn't do that in fear or quaking. She does that in a kind of spirit of Harriet Tubman, liberty or death, display to her children that she will fight. She will go down fighting. And that comes from the revolutionary history of Grenada and the Caribbean that is part of her identity and that she passed on to her children. Now, Malcolm doesn't talk a lot about that. When he talks about his childhood, he talks more about structural and institutionalized racism and more about Marcus Garvey. However, you see a lot of Louise's influence when we learn a little bit more about her. So, what I would like you to do first is, if Gina, you can try to Google Fedon's Rebellion, and that is something that is a Grenadian historical event. And if Shadaria and Rama, you can Google and just see what information and images you can find about Ya Asantewa. I believe she was Ghanaian. She was an Asante queen who fought the British around the time that Louise Little was born. One other thing is that Louise's grandparents were from Nigeria, and Britain was trying to stop the slave trade in the 1800s. So they sometimes captured ships that held slaves illegally, and sometimes freed the people who were on those ships. About 6% of people who were brought across the Middle Passage illegally were given freedom, and Louise's grandparents were. So they held on to and knew their Nigerian heritage. They didn't have the concern, the problem that often came about when people were enslaved and they were forced to forget their past. So that's just another detail of Louise's internationalism. And if you find those things already, you can also Google Louise Little, who is Malcolm's mother, and see what images or information you find about her. Now, for the people who are here, I don't know if we'll be able to find Leapers Hill. It is a place in Grenada. I don't know if that'll come up in a Google search. But Lizette, if you want to try. Leapers Hill, yeah. And I'm wondering if I should add the idea of the Grenadian free Africans and the idea of Louise's grandparents coming from Nigeria. I don't know what we can find about that. This is all pretty new research. So let's see. Louise Little. Kat, do you want to take Louise Little? See what you can find about her, please. And Bailey, since you just came in, if you can just see what you can Google and find out about Louise Little, Malcolm's mom. We're just doing a little scavenger hunt. If you want to grab an iPad, you're welcome. Did I assign you one yet?
No.
What's your name again?
Nicole.
Nicole. You can take Arawak. Aaliyah, do you want to take Carib? Mm-hmm. And Hannah, you can have Grenada, West Indies. So basically, not just the history of these places and peoples, but also, if somebody else also wants to try Fedon's Rebellion, that's probably a little bit more tricky. But I'm interested also in the images, and what does Grenada look like, and what kind of art or images or remembrances can we find about this place where Louise Little was born? And when you can't find anything that's not behind a paywall, let's see. 1 second, and we're going to take about 5 or 10 minutes to do this. And then I think we can probably use Microsoft Sway. Am I sharing yet? No, let me share. Let me show you, Gina, and because Microsoft Sway often has useful open things. And so you and I can kind of look together for that. Yeah, I know what you mean. So you could also try the USC Upstate Library, but I'm going to share the screen and try to take a look for these. The first thing I'm going to do is go to Microsoft, because I like to use Sway for digital storytelling, and then I can share it. I can share the link so that you can all edit it. In an ideal world where the internet works, you know. So this is going to be Did I spell Louise right? It looks really weird to me. Okay, let's see. So one of the useful things about Sway is that it has a lot of open source images and things that you can use. So let's see. So over here with suggested searches, we can see if they can find anything about Louise Little. And I don't know who these Louise Littles are, but I'm pretty sure they're not Malcolm X's mother. Let me try it that way. Let me try this. I can't believe there's not a picture of her. That might be a historical marker for like a place that she lived. I don't know what that is. Boy, it's tough to find Louise Little. So I'm going to switch over and I'm going to look at the Upstate Library search up, because that can be useful sometimes, and check for some of our, let's see, so have to go to academics and library. This is, that is her, Louise Langdon Norton Little. This is from the Amsterdam News, so that's probably a pretty good one. Let me see. Merrill Collins is also a really good scholar, so let's see. And that might never open. The Amsterdam News is a well, this is a bit of a pickle. I've never seen these EBSCO versions before, so I don't know why it's doing open source when we were on campus. Okay. That is really annoying. I don't know why that's happening because we should be able to find an article from the Amsterdam News. But I'm going to abandon that search for a second and go back to the story of her life was an epic one. The epic began in Grenada, continued in Canada, and ended here in the States. In all 3 centuries, there are parts of her life waiting to be resurrected. So this is a full article about Louise. And let's try the library also for Fidon's Rebellion. To type it, usually, and I don't think it came up in Blackboard, if you type option E, you can get the appropriate accent on the word. Now, the first one that pops up, which is Emplaced Myths of Fidon's Rebellion and Tourism Representations, looks kind of interesting because I'm wondering whether it might have images. Okay, if this is about tourism representations, it should have pictures. What is wrong with people? Well, okay, maybe all of these links might have information about that. I like this particular, at least there's a map, so I like this image because it does tell us a little bit about where we can find Grenada. Very close to, is that Venezuela? Is it on the other side? Okay. So I'm going to have to figure that out. Venezuela? Or Grenada? Okay, yeah, I'll figure that out. Give me a second. Because it's over here. So, I also don't like being geographically challenged. I do have a shower curtain that has like a map of the world, so I try to look things up as much as possible, but I don't spend that much time in the shower to really get a good idea of it. Let's see if there's any other images. But there are links and images in here for... Hello, Isabel. What? Yeah. Guyana. Okay, so what's the larger country on the mainland? Because I think it's showing us that Venezuela is right there, isn't it?
So.
Yeah?
Yeah, it looks like it.
It's Venezuela?
I think so.
Oh my goodness, I guessed it right. I should be on Jeopardy. So, we're looking at the place where Malcolm X's mother was born and looking at a little bit of the history of that place, so that we're really quickly going to throw together a story about it and her. So, we've been searching a few things, Googling and looking a little bit at the library to determine more about her history. And let's see. I'm going to try to throw in my little map here of where Grenada is. But as usual, I have 75 open windows. Okay. So I've started this little sway where you can add in pictures and text, and we'll see if we can break Microsoft by inviting everybody to just put in the information that you find with images, if possible. Gina, was the library link useful for you to find anything? So in our Blackboard link right there, there is a link to this sway that you all should be able to access. And if it's not working on your phone, you can grab an iPad because it should work better that way. I'm not sure. Although we might not have the appropriate apps on the iPad. That's often a problem. I could email you the link. You want me to do that? I'll email everybody the link. I'm going to email it an announcement, so y'all find out if you're not getting my fascinating announcements. Merle Collins is also a really wonderful author. She wrote one of the first articles I found there from the library about Louise Little. And I can't tell the difference between an attachment and a link. I know. I was hoping it would be a little bit calmer because it is like almost break. And I thought maybe a lot of people would skip out. But, I mean, not in this class, but generally on campus. Oh, so you can actually go there as a tourist destination.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, oh, let's go on a Caribbean vacation and see where a whole bunch of people committed suicide. Super fun. So if you should be able to just like drag things onto the desktop, hopefully, to upload them. I'm not sure if it would be that easy. Or you can just kind of add information about these various places to the sway if you can link it. What the hiddly heck? What have you? How nice.
Yeah, because the little thing that I pulled up, it says, Grenadian. Vacation made simple.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what we call historical tourism. I think that since I'm on TripAdvisor, It's showing me lots of things in Grenada. Historical tours of Grenada. I've never been there, but what a view. And we had homemade ice cream. Oh boy. No, the English didn't push the French to their death. What? Is this someplace in Canada? Yes, the Caribs jumped to their death. Thank you. And don't miss the ice cream. Oh my God. That is a second reference to the ice cream at this place of mass suicide. I mean, I love ice cream, but really?
I've seen on Airbnb before that people have put those slave houses on Airbnb. That was only used a lot. And they took the house off Airbnb.
What house?
It was like a slave house and it was on Airbnb.
A slave cabin.
Cabin. Yeah. It was on there. And it was like the full history was in there and a lot of like people were saying that the house was so beautiful, so historic, so rich in history. And it got viral on social media. And I think they took the house. It's not on Airbnb. Yeah, remodeled it and everything. Nice.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, they're really smart, those tours. I mean, even in the movie Harriet, the place where Harriet Tubman lived before she freed herself was a small plantation. But even in the movie, they make the cabins look really like you could Airbnb them. There is a sand floor, but you know, people like to do that stuff on The Bachelor in Paradise, so whatever. I don't know. I mean, is there like something really wrong with people that?
Do people just not get embarrassed anymore? Because I be getting embarrassed for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like nobody else just seems to.
Yeah. Shame. People just need some shame. Goodness gracious. I mean, white people particularly need a little healthy shame. Not necessarily guilt, but a little shame for the past and understanding that this affects all of us, therefore we need to get it together and stop letting shit like this happen.
I don't know. I feel like people just don't think before they do things either.
Very nice romantic story about the Carib Indians committing suicide by jumping off the cliffs. That's a lovely story.
They use the word romantic.
Romantic.
I feel like that might be a little bit satirical.
A little what?
Satirical. Not satirical, but not.
Yeah, because they got 3 stars.
Yeah, like sarcastic.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, that might be,
Like
yeah, okay,
sarcastic.
that might be sarcastic. The second half, yes, they were forced off the cliff and executed by French soldiers. No, because the French soldiers wanted to capture and enslave them, but I'm glad that you have, I'm glad that guy has a little perspective that this is fucked up. Okay, sobering memorial, okay, here's some, but these are like all, anyway, I'm sorry. So if you just want to put these things into our sway. And someone even put the asylum where she was imprisoned. Smart. Who did that? Okay. Very good. I mean, not that I'm going to, and was there good ice cream there? But, you know. Yes, so. So part of what we're doing in building this project is to take a moment as we think about Malcolm X and go off script from the autobiography to take into consideration the influence his mother had on his life as a woman from Grenada who was really knowledgeable about her history. She moved from Grenada to Montreal, Canada, I think when she was 19 years old, to help her uncle start a chapter of the UNIA. She worked closely with Marcus Garvey. And in a really wonderful book that I have been reading, that I should also credit for this particular knowledge, because I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't really think carefully about it until I read the book. called The Three Mothers. Which I'm not going to find in Sway, but I was looking in a script. And she also has a short TED Talk if you're interested. I wonder why I couldn't put the image. Oh, I know, because someone else is trying to catch. Okay, I think it's because it's a web page. So, should we go ahead and tell our story now? It looks like we have a lot of material. Are we all ready to go? Yeah. So, oh, it isn't showing up? You might just have to, if you put something on the Sway, if it's already there, when I refresh the screen, it'll probably show up. So,
How do I get there?
to Sway,
Yes, sir.
there's a link in the chat.
What chat?
In Blackboard Collaborate. Okay, so don't worry about it. I know you had to come from another class. I just enjoy chaos, so that's my favorite teaching method is like, okay, I know you're all tired and bored, so we're going to do something crazy.
I know I can't call it, so I just hit forward session.
No, you just have, the reason we have the link is just so you can add things to the Sway. So we have made this story called Louise Little's Global History. And it tells us the story of how Malcolm X's mother affected his work as a leader. Malcolm X was from Grenada. Malcolm X's mother, Louise, was from Grenada. And the first people, the original inhabitants of Grenada, were the Arawak. So who had Arawak and who made the next slide? So go ahead and tell us a little bit about the Arawak and how they fared.
They're originally from the Venezuela area, and then they expanded from there. They were usually in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. They were a very peaceful group of people who were in small groups called kingdoms, usually with a leader.
Mm-hmm.
But they were almost too peaceful, and they were often attacked and were forced to relocate off
Okay.
And they practice a lot of cave arts, believing that caves were a place of spiritual importance.
Okay.
A lot of the cave carvings are still found in the Caribbean today.
Do you know what the vintage is of this picture? Okay, because there are not a lot of Arawak people left.
No, it says there's maybe 10,000, but that's just a very rough estimate.
Okay, because in large part, they were sometimes the Caribs defeated them, but more often it was the colonizers who first tried to, throughout South America, tried to enslave the indigenous people, and it often didn't work. People would run away, people would die, people would refuse to work. So that's when they got the really bright idea, I'm being very sarcastic, to start transatlantic slavery. And is this an Arawak or a Carib individual? Carib? Okay, so go ahead and tell us a little about the Carib then, Aaliyah.
The Carib were one of the two tribes who inhabited the Caribbean during Christopher Columbus's invasion of the world. Like most of the indigenous peoples of the New World, the Carib suffered greatly from European colonization from the Americas and the European conquest. And their descendants are now scattered throughout the Caribbean and South America, with the largest group living on the island of Dominica, where the British established a reservation.
Okay, so the British established a reservation on Dominica for the few remaining Carib people.
3,400 people live there.
3,400? There's also the Grenadian people who are a hybrid community of Carib, Arawak, and African. I know some people who are Grenadian. They speak a language called Garifuna, which is a combination of African, Carib, and Arawak, and maybe a little bit of Spanish. So, and this is an artistic rendering of the Carib leaping from Leaper's Hill. Okay. So, have any of you seen the movie Harriet?
I have.
So she leaps from a bridge. Harriet Tubman leapt from a bridge, and very often people who were being chased by slave chasers leapt from bridges rather than submit to slavery again. It's the kind of live free or die, very radical message that we can sometimes get. She survived, obviously, but these people may not have. Most of them didn't survive. They might have escaped and gotten to Dominica. This is the island of Grenada, my only contribution here, where Louise was born. And then we have the ethnic composition of Grenada. Who found that? Hannah, so you can go ahead. I'll try, I'm gonna move so we can hear a little bit more of this.
So,
I should have done this sooner, but yes.
at one point, Grenada was a French settlement, and then it was capitulated to the British.
Capitulated.
Thank you. I was like, I did not know this word.
Uh-huh.
And in the late 18th century, the British imported a large number of slaves from Africa to work sugar plantations.
Uh-huh.
And the British occupied Grenada from, looks like actually it might have been like the late 1700s to, 1967. And so because of the large numbers of slaves that were imported from Africa, the majority of the population is made up of black individuals.
Okay. And very difficult to ascertain the actual Carib or Arawak population due to the decimation of those populations. And Louise's grandparents were the 6% of this 82% that were emancipated Africans, meaning the British made rules about transatlantic slavery, so occasionally liberated people when they were brought illegally to Grenada. Liza, were you going to say something about that? It's interesting that it's only 6%, right? It's like gesture, lip service.
So Louise Little was brought over from Venezuela.
Louise Little, I'm sorry, was from Grenada.
Grenada,
She was
okay.
born in the late 1800s
Okay.
in Grenada. And this history of Grenada is a history she was very conversant with.
Okay,
Which-
because I read on one of my articles that it said
Yeah.
that she was very, like, she knew a lot about her historical, like, context.
Yes, she had, very much like the history of the Haitian Revolution that we've talked about is an influence for African Americans, even those who weren't from Haiti.
Yes.
Grenada has some similar history and inspiration. So, is this Louise? Is
That's
this
the
the
picture
parents?
I saw too.
Okay, so this is Malcolm's parents.
I think so.
Okay, it seems like, and this is the little family. This could be, yeah. This is the book, The Three Mothers, which gave me this idea to talk a little bit more about the global influence that Malcolm got from his mother, in addition to the Garvey influence. Okay, there was also a rebellion in Grenada that we had a little more trouble finding information about, called Fedon's Rebellion, that was inspired by the Haitian Revolution, that was an anti-colonial rebellion. So this is another important, and did anybody find Fedon's Rebellion? No? Okay. We'll have to, F-E with an accent, D-O-N. So, in addition to, as I keep saying, the Garveyite influence, it's not surprising that this was Malcolm X's mother. And even though he often gives a lot of credit to Elijah Muhammad, in what ways can you imagine that her background influenced him? Like, what are things that happened in Malcolm X's life that you can imagine a mother with this proud knowledge of her history and national history, being Grenadian, might endow her son and her children with? Knowing these things about her. So let me be more specific. When she was 18 or 19, she left Grenada and she moved to Montreal. So as we can see, if we look at the map, Grenada is really far from Montreal, Canada. Grenada, this is South America. If you go all the way up past all of Mexico and the United States and the Caribbean, to the very top, Montreal's way, way north. So she took an incredibly long journey by ship to Montreal because she wanted to be an activist. She was 19 years old. She wanted to use her knowledge and her background to uplift, liberate, emancipate people of African descent worldwide. So it was an international journey. She spoke 6 languages, I think Malcolm had said, but she spoke French as a Grenadian. So in Montreal, they also speak French. It's kind of different Quebecois French. And so that's the first place that she went. But then she went to Michigan and Iowa and traveled all around. So how would a mother like that inspire her children to do the things that Malcolm did? Like, what did he do that seems to be following in her footsteps?
Malcolm was an activist, and I think even just like seeing his mom and like knowing her life story of just like how passionately she believed in him and like what she believed in, and that she was like willing to travel a great distance for it and like reach people and like inspire others. And I think even knowing the background of the rebellion that took place in Grenada,
Yeah.
I think from what I saw on the website I looked at, like either contributed or led to like emancipation for slaves. Like she had the knowledge that like you can change things in the world,
Yeah.
and like life is not supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
Like racial discrimination and prejudice and just racism. And so
Yeah.
I think I could see how she would instill like confidence and like pride in her children,
Yeah.
and that would influence them to be
Yeah, the connection to Africa too, with her free Grenadian Nigerian parents, also instills the idea that people from Africa are free, knowledgeable about freedom, capable of adapting anywhere in the world, but also can fight for freedom. So the Queen, Ya Santiwa, the Queen from Ghana, who fought the British at the time Louise was born, is another story that she knew. So she knew that women too could fight for freedom, could fight colonialism. And there's something called, if you know of Bob Marley, did anyone ever listen to Bob Marley? Have you ever heard the term mental slavery? So what does Bob Marley mean when he says emancipate yourself from mental slavery?
To get your mind out of the mental prison that slavery put you in.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been complacent, I guess.
Uh-huh.
These circumstances are natural, they're normal, they always happen, so why should I stop doing those things?
Right. And Bob Marley is a Jamaican and a Rastafarian. There's also connections there to Marcus Garvey and the idea of going back to Africa. It's the idea that Africa will reach forth her hands to God, that Africa is the future of the world, and people of African descent, therefore, have the capacity and the gifts to become an important part of the modern world, whereas mental slavery is the idea, the very racist idea, the internalized racism of black people being passive and not having the intellectual and leadership qualities to overthrow colonialism, imperialism, racism in general. So Bob Marley's super political, radical, revolutionary, even though he doesn't sing it in a particularly fierce voice and it seems relaxing. You know, that's part of a Caribbean tradition that Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley and Louise Little all believed. They never accepted the idea of their own inferiority. They never internalized racism because they held close to all of these positive identifications with blackness and with Africa. Now, for many people who were enslaved, who were cut off from their roots and their background, it might have been more difficult to have a positive identification with Africa, and therefore to understand that you come from a people with kings and queens and as many, African Americans have as many innovations and inventions as per capita any other group of people in the world too, but particularly, understanding the history of Africa is powerful. Have any of you traveled to another country? Who has a passport? Hannah? Where have you been?
I've been to Mexico and Italy.
Did you go by yourself?
No, I went with family.
Okay. So Louise Little was 19 and she moved to Montreal from Grenada. Montreal is cold as hell. It is a slightly different version of the language. It's a completely different culture than Grenada. And Malcolm, likewise, moved from Detroit to Boston, which isn't as big of a move. But to truly change his life and make a difference, where did he go? Where was his big move? Harlem, and then also to Mecca. He left the United States completely, and by leaving his homeland, he discovered himself, that transformation and understanding of true Islam. So that we might call people cosmopolitan. You might have heard of the drink, a cosmopolitan, has nothing to do with that. Cosmopolitan is the idea that you have an intellectual openness to the world and you're a citizen of the world, and Louise was and Malcolm was. It's an ideal of not feeling like you're only part of one nation, but that you're connected more broadly and can identify with different nations. When I was 22, I got on a plane and went to Botswana by myself for a year. So I had money, I had a Fulbright grant, I had people there waiting for me, I had a lot of prestige to take with me. And it was hard, and it was scary as hell, and it truly made a difference in my identity. But imagining Louise doing that, she was not a wealthy person, you know? She was 19, she had hardly any money. Malcolm had to kind of rely on the generosity of others too, even when he went to Mecca. He didn't have the money and the resources. He had to be sponsored and assisted. So the ways that that kind of mobility can change your identity, I think, also helps us understand the connection. And have I? Okay, well, yeah. I wanted to go over the transformation quiz too. So should we talk about Malcolm and the transformation quiz, or should we take a quick look at Fidal's rebellion and Ya Santawa? Okay, let's go to the transformation quiz. I'll try to remember to add Fidal's rebellion and Ya Santawa to this as well. But thank you for doing a great job and finding really interesting information here about Louise and Grenada. I hope that this will connect us a little bit more to understanding Malcolm X's changes and how he grew into the amazing leader that he was for a very short time before he was assassinated. Makes his assassination even more painful. So I'm going to scroll down to transformation here. And we won't have time to talk about the movie, but I think the movie and the screenshot discussion are a really good opportunity for connection with the online part of the class and everybody here. And I think that discussion doesn't need my influence. So in the transformation section, you can put, everyone gets full credit here, but you can just write whatever you want. I had an old video, which was too much of me talking. So, no government laws can ever enforce brotherhood. The only world solution is governments guided by true religion of the Spirit. So he believes that we need Islam, and the black man needs Islam. The black man has been America's most fervent Christian, and where has it gotten him? And with the white man's interpretation, Christianity has, where has Christianity brought the world? It's a really harsh criticism and a really controversial statement. So let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, no government laws can ever enforce brotherhood. Does anybody disagree with that statement? Can you think of any ways that the government, maybe force is a bad word, could the government ever do anything to foster anti-racism or more cross-cultural communication, cooperation? Well, Malcolm says that, for example, the Ku Klux Klan will say that it doesn't matter if you change the laws, the government can't force people to have racial unity. The Ku Klux Klan is an organization that's often anti-government because, you know, they don't want any part of this supposed desegregation, affirmative action, etc. So Malcolm's like, you know what, they're right. The government can't make us get along. The government can't bring about racial equality.
That might be true, but I don't see why the government can't
Try?
can't try. Like they can try to promote better like interactions among like people.
Hate crimes? Yes, Hannah?
Oh, I was just gonna say, sometimes I feel like the government, like, within itself, like, promotes division, just the way that, like, our government's set up.
Yeah.
And, like, this might be a very unpopular opinion, but I've, like, had conversations with friends where I'm like, sometimes I think we should just have twins forever. And it's
Yeah.
like, I think even just, like, our two-party system is very, like, it just promotes division. Like, I feel like our country is so,
Yeah.
this is my
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's all just like, and if our government, I feel like, looked more representative of the American population.
Well, that's exactly what Meg is afraid of. It's, what are they called, the 2%ers or something? There's a lot of fear of a black planet, which is what Chuck D called it in 1991 with that iconic Public Enemy album, which we really should listen to in this class. But forgive me for digressing. So the government can't force brotherhood, but the government should have hate crimes laws. How about if we had a different government, though?
I feel like I can't really talk on that because I don't know enough about the government, and
Yeah.
the government that I know much about is going to be democracy.
Can you think of any government leaders, any established recognizable figures in American politics today who might be able to bring about brotherhood, sisterhood, anti-racism? Bernie Sanders?
AOC.
AOC, she causes more division than. I mean, I love AOC, but she pisses people off. She's not that important. They spend more time on Fox News railing about AOC than they did about Obama. I mean, it's amazing.
I don't know. I feel like that's
So,
just ignorance.
I
though, because
love
everything
her,
that she
but-
says, I feel like makes so much sense to me. And then I see these rich old white people on Fox News talking about her, and I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, I love her, but boy, is she, talk about the great divide. She's throwing dynamite in it, left and right. So,
Well,
how
maybe
about
that's
Stacey,
what it
let's,
needs.
how about Stacey Abrams? Part of Stacey Abrams'
I don't know.
progress. Stacey Abrams is from Georgia.
She ran for the governor.
She ran for governor of Georgia, yes. And I think she's going to run again.
Yeah, she was. But I had a feeling that she wasn't gonna win.
Yeah.
Like the bubbling, like the anticipation made me think, well, she's definitely gonna win. But then I did not. So.
Yeah, Stacey Abrams is a really interesting leader because she's from Georgia, so she kind of knows that she can't be AOC. So she has a very different approach. And is Cori Bush the former ER nurse from Missouri? Is that her name? I keep forgetting her name.
I don't know. There's like this 19 or 20-year-old boy who's running for House of Representatives in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
Really young, like he's in college at University of Florida.
Uh-huh.
Really young. He does a bunch of TikTok ads.
Huh. Well, that's the thing. You all are seeing Tic Tac, and here I am being old. You got your Tic Tacs, and all these Tic Tacs. People are getting Tic Tacs, and then they vote for somebody. So yeah, I mean, TikTok. So apparently they had a TikTok influencer at the White House, and it caused a big brouhaha because Fox News all pissed their pants.
I mean, I'm not.
But she's a law student, and she's really knowledgeable. Yeah. I heard it on the radio. I didn't write it down, but there's a law student who has at least 500,000 followers on TikTok who does political analysis, and it's a woman. I'm not sure of her race, but she was at a White House press conference. So it's not like Kim Kardashian was at a White House press conference. She has more followers than that.
Because she's from TikTok, and Trump tried to outlaw TikTok like 8 times.
Because they kicked him off, right?
Tried to get rid of Twitter.
I'm sure he's back on it, but yeah.
Man has a secret account.
Well, he has enough people to tweet for him, so. So I don't exactly remember her name, but I heard a really interesting conversation with Stacey Abrams Sunday morning that I need to link to my other class. But yeah, Stacey Abrams I think is a really interesting figure. I need to learn more about her. There is a great Netflix thing about AOC, Cori Bush, I think that's her name, but you're probably wrong. And then I always forget the name of the woman from Minnesota who's Muslim, who is a member of Congress.
Cori Bush is.
But those three are the ones
US
that the
representative.
really far out Republicans always want to kill. Yeah, that's Cori Bush. She's from Missouri, right? U.S. representative from Missouri. So anyway, this question of brotherhood and how we might foster it. I don't know how I feel about Malcolm's alternative when he says Islam. I have nothing against Islam. I feel that Islam can be as liberatory a religion as Christianity, although I personally am Christian. But he also says government of the spirit. Government guided by true religion of the spirit. This is not a new idea. Ralph Waldo Emerson, famous white guy who promoted so many ideas about self-reliance and being an American that even conservatives have no problem with him, advocated a politics of love, which was a similar idea. And the idea that we get from Emerson in 1840 that I get from Malcolm X 120 years later is that a government of the spirit would require that when we look at someone else, we see them as a child of God. Now, this is a problem for atheists, obviously. But whether you're Muslim, and you remember in the Malcolm X on Canadian TV, he said, whether you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, it's all one God. That we see the radical equality of each person's soul as a divine person because we're all connected to God. And the way that you proceed in life as a God-breathing machine, that's a Francis Harper term, I think, no, it's a Harriet Jacobs term, is that you move forward with love to connect with other people. So I think that philosophically, Malcolm is saying a lot more here than we could understand without realizing that he read stuff for a very long time, especially when he was in prison. But we would need, the current government that we have right now is not going to be a government of the true spirit. And I'm more afraid that if we had a religious government, what do you think the tendency of a religious government in the United States might look like if it stepped in today?
It would be very for the white man.
I don't think it would be a religion of the spirit. I think that given today's political climate and today's beliefs, that if there was a triumph of a religion in politics, currently everything that we see about religion and politics is connected to family values and patriarchy and, not necessarily radical equality. So I don't think Malcolm could have anticipated that. I'm not going to blame him. But has anyone seen The Handmaid's Tale?
I was just about to say that.
Rewatching
I
it
was
now.
just.
Yeah.
I think when abortion first got overturned, somebody mentioned that show on Twitter, and I was like,
Yeah.
that was a lot.
Yeah.
Have you read the book?
I haven't.
The TV show is like they
It's
do
based
a pretty,
on a book.
They do a pretty good job converting it to film and stuff, but
Yeah.
they miss a bunch of stuff. Like there's a bunch of stuff that's like just really glazed
That always
over.
happens, yeah.
Mhm.
And there's also another book.
There's another one?
Yeah,
I didn't know
she
that.
wrote a sequel very recently.
read-
Margaret Atwood wrote it.
I read
Yeah.
there was like this kind of like response book that somebody else had written as a response to The Handmaid's Tale.
Mhm.
It was The Power by Naomi
There's
Alderman.
probably a lot of fan fiction. Now, just to circle back to that idea of government of the spirit, think about the spirit of liberty. In every human soul there exists the yearning, going back to Phyllis Wheatley. If we trusted Wheatley and her, everyone who considered themselves an ancestor of Wheatley, then we might be able to trust this idea that Malcolm proposes for brotherhood. But that's not what we have now. It would require a revolution. It would require kind of redefining us, going back to Phyllis Wheatley. So in our next question, Malcolm is extremely critical of Christianity, and especially talking about Christianity as the driving force of colonialism. At the same time, African Americans have been missionaries to Africa since white people have, possibly even before. In Freedom's Journal, starting in Phyllis Wheatley's time, if Wheatley had survived, she might have gone to Sierra Leone because there was a plan for Phyllis Wheatley and her compatriots to, if they chose, stop in Canada for a hot minute, get themselves organized, and then go to Sierra Leone. So when Malcolm talks about Christianity and missionaries, he's incredibly angry about it. I think the missionary history in Grenada that his mother might have taught him about very well was a lot more obviously violent when we think about exterminating the first peoples in South America. But the Christian church returned to Africa under the banner of the cross, conquering, killing, exploiting, pillaging, raping, etc. Mankind's history has proved from one era to another that the true criterion of leadership is spiritual. Men are attracted by spirit. By power, men are forced. Love is engendered by spirit. By power, anxieties are created. So he's equating Christianity with power and Islam with spirit, which is very much his place in Islam at that moment and his belief in Islam. But the idea of trusting one religion still makes me feel very Handmaid's Tale. However, could we as humans possibly evolve into these ideas to be attracted by spirit rather than power? What would that mean? Love is engendered by spirit. Brotherhood and sisterhood are acts of love. We haven't shown the tendency to step in that direction historically. Now, when we jump forward, we're going directly to the psychology. The racist psychology of the American white man comes from the political, economic, and social systems. There you have critical race theory in a nutshell. That it is systems and institutions of power that promote inequality.
But I mean, didn't the white man create these institutions?
Yes.
So
Yep.
it's like,
And when offered power, people of various races also participated. There were Cherokee who owned black slaves. There were African Americans who caught fugitives. There were African kings who sold slaves to Europeans. So I'm not saying that to whitewash or cleanse any historical guilt from the colonizing nations that were the most power hungry by any means, but I'm just saying anybody can easily get seduced by power and become sadistic, regardless of who you are. Yeah. However, strategically speaking, a lot of people cry at school board meetings about critical race theory and teaching their children that they're racist. There's a lot of emotion in white women's tears about it. Do you think that strategically the conversation could be less emotionally loaded if we could put aside the emotions and the white and the blame and say, this psychology comes from institutions? Like, yeah, we all know who made the institutions. Not
I feel
judge,
like
but
people white people just need to recognize that it's not about them, actually. It has, you're not being oppressed.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I read a review of the book, The Three Mothers, and somebody put, so the social workers were targeting Louise Little. What about poor white families? This is completely unbalanced.
but
Who
it's
the
not
hell cares
white
about poor
people.
white?
It's about Louise Little.
Louise
Malcolm
Little
X's
was an
mother.
activist and an intellectual who was wrongfully incarcerated for 20 years. And I don't think it was because she was poor, you know? And the social workers hated her because she was uppity, because she was brilliant, and she was organizing people. That's different from social workers that mess with everybody because they're incompetent. I mean, social workers were messing with a family in Spartanburg who just moved here from Vermont, who were beating an 8-year-old, not allowing her to go to school and making her eat cat shit. I just read about that story. Yeah, social workers fuck with people, and probably they should. But Louise Little is not someone that they should have been messing with. That's not the point, yeah. So yeah, to a certain point, no, it's not about a contest, about who's the most oppressed or who's righteous. It's about clearly identifying injustice. And yeah, here we have a case of it. And the psychology that we get from these institutions of authority and power does not help us along. Okay, we are running very short on time. We've got 2 minutes left. He finds conservatives and liberals equally useless, which is something that South Africans also said. South Africans dealt with Dutch Boers, who were the more conservatives, and then the English settlers, who were the more liberal. And they always would say that the British liberals smile at you with the front teeth and bite you with the back teeth. That's the South African saying. So if you don't get beyond the nationality identity politics, then you're still either going to be more obviously, and there's also comments about Southerners supposedly being racist, but then you go up north and it's not the land of milk and honey. You know, there's different kinds of racism. At least you know what you're dealing with when someone's wearing a white sheet. But when you have a boss who's going to chip away at your identity and not ever let you get a raise and make you die of a heart attack when you're 50 because of his connections to institutionalized racism, you know, it'd be helpful if you knew to begin with. You just wore the white sheet, maybe.
I think it's interesting because when you compare it to like European racism, I feel like they say that their racism is more subtle. So it's like when you say northern racism, you don't know exactly what it is until it happens. So it's not very bad. I just thought that was.
But at least you can avoid some damage if you just step aside. But you get sucked into and destroyed by that kind of subtle racism too. Castration, yes, psychological castration is what he's talking about there, and imagination. Now, I don't agree with him that America's black leaders had a lack of imagination. And I'm kind of surprised he would say that as someone who had read W.E.B. Du Bois. But I think what he might suggest here is this is just kind of a critique of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And it's less international focus. You know, we can change these laws here in the United States and make the South better. That was the initial goal with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And notice international there. That is why I'm so interested in Louise Little. Let's see. America's racism, white people have to get to work. South Africans said the same thing. There he is with Maya Angelou. And, okay, so anyway. We went over, so there